This episode of Recording Studio Rockstars is brought to you by OWC, Spectra 1964, Sampley, Carl Tatz Design, and iZotope. In fact, you're hearing my voice right now through iZotope RX and Ozone, all recorded safely onto an OWC SSD. So get ready to rock.
But there's something unique that happens from the Haas effect, which is basically running a delay on the source and keeping it, between, I think it's 11 and like 40 milliseconds. And if you introduce that into the stereo field to make something stick out, wherever you put it in the stereo field, your brain will not differentiate it from the actual source.
Welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars. I'm Lij Shaw, and this is the podcast created to help you become a rock star of the recording studio. Do you need to record direct stereo keyboards? Spectra 1964 now offers the Stereo BBDI-2 with custom wound high-Z transformers for big headroom, virtually flat response, and a 15 dB input pad. The Spectra 1964 BBDI passive direct box is also perfect for recording deep bass that will make your mixes sound huge. Plug that into a C610 complementer, and as founder Bill Cheney points out, it'll move your pant leg. Get your sound moving at Spectra1964.com. If you are rocking a Mac Mini M1 in your studio, then you should definitely check out the new OWC Mini Stack STX Thunderbolt 4 certified storage and hub expansion solution. It's the perfect size to seamlessly stack with the Mac Mini and add storage and connectivity over Thunderbolt or USB. Whether you have the new or old Mac Mini, nothing stacks up in your studio quite like OWC. Find the new Mini Stack STX and all your storage needs at macsales.com/rockstars. Howdy, Rockstars. It's your host, Lij Shaw, and welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars, bringing you into the studio to learn from recording professionals so that you can make your best record ever and be a rock star of the studio yourself. My guest today is Craig Parker Adams, who in 1997 was lucky enough to take over a historic recording space in Hollywood, California, which would become known as Winslow Ct Studio. The studio's original history was said to be one of the oldest audio recording studios in the world for film, dating all the way back to the early 1900s. So that's pretty awesome. At one time, it was an RCA location as well as Columbia, but nonetheless, by way of doing, Craig would eventually become a word-of-mouth go-to guy for many diverse artists and top-tier session players. Owning and operating a historic boutique recording studio business in the heart of Hollywood for 20 plus years and working with accomplished artists from all over the world, as well as a multitude of industry greats of varying styles, ranging all the way from opera to punk, writers and artists, producers, directors, photographers, editors, engineers, thinkers, healers, politicians, actors, models, athletes, and even motivational speakers, has brought so much to Craig's studio skills, production, and all-around artistic insights. On my addition here, some of the credits that really jump right out to me too, working on Zappa records, working with dweezil, doing his own music, which we'll talk about. Craig sounds like Eddie Van Halen just made another recording. I even saw there was a Val Kilmer credit in there. So I think part of the reason that the intro sounds a little bit all over the place is because you're being honest that you're, Craig, you've done a vast variety of stuff in this really, really cool studio. So thank you so much also to Ian Brennan for making our introduction. Ian, we need to have you back on the show again soon. Please welcome Craig Parker Adams to Recording Studio Rockstars. Craig, are you ready to rock, dude?
Yeah, let's roll.
Dude, so, welcome to the show. Give us a little bit of an introduction to who you are. The studio, Winslow Ct, it's quite something to see, and what a history of the place. So give us the brief arc of who you are and how you got into it, and tell us about your studio.
Well, who I am basically is a guy who grew up in Minnesota and got out of high school and moved to California and started playing in bands. And, when I was playing in bands, most of the recordings that we were getting just never did it for me. And that just kind of pushed me kind of a parallel alongside of trying to get a band off the ground, of like trying to learn how to get the sound that I wanted to hear. And so that ultimately led to getting my own space, and just learning how to record on my own. Basically starting from a 2-track to a 4-track to an 8-track to a 16-track. And it was that 16-track that I got where I did a recording where a lot of my friends, music friends, were like, "Oh, that sounds great. Would you be interested in recording me or my band?" And that's what actually started me into a business, because I'd never sought that out. It just
Hmm.
kind of happened. Once the 16 track came into play for me, I had the 3M M56. That was right when I got my studio in '97. And I did a recording, with the band I was in, and a lot of my friends really liked the sonics of what went down, and so people just started asking me, "Hey, will you record me? Will you record me?" And that really is the genesis of Winslow Ct Studio. That's how it even started. So it was never my desire to do that. It's just that's how my path ended up.
And
And
so
now,
for you starting out of music, you was this like Minneapolis originally
Actually,
when you
actually, it was Mendota Heights, St. Paul area, and more on the outskirts of town.
yeah.
And so I affectionately refer to it as rural Minnesota, although it was suburban to a sense. But there was a farm literally right down the street. So I was on the city limits of St. Paul, West St. Paul area.
Right on.
Um, and there was music in the house. My father was a singer in a barbershop quartet. My mom was a singer in a Sweet Adeline's chorus. And then I had an older brother who was into the heavy, heavy stuff. He was 7 years older than me, and I had to share a room with him. So when I'm 5, 6 years old, he's playing Sabbath, Zeppelin, Zappa, all of that. So I was
It's
exposed to
awesome.
to the heavy stuff real early. And then my sister was into different, more of the pop music of the day. So it was just a musical household. However, I think my musical instincts and interests were there from the go. In other words, it wasn't so much me watching others going, "I want to do that." It was kind of like, this is what I'm supposed to do. That's how I always viewed it.
Yeah.
Um, so, anyways, by the time my folks took us out to California in '76 on a vacation, and when we got back home, I'm like, how come we don't live out in vacation land? So, as soon as I got out of high school, I moved to vacation land, and just started, making a life playing, trying to get a band off the ground. And it just that aspect never happened. But while that was, being nurtured, I was learning all of these techniques and recording, experiences. And eventually that's what ended up serving me, because like I said, when I got that 16 track and cut this record, friends were just, it just started. And I never, after, it's 22 years, I never advertised that business ever.
Yeah.
It just kept coming and coming. And what was wonderful about that is I used to question myself, because I was a musician, a guitar player, I kind of had a focus and a purpose, but I got diverted and I really didn't know why. Now I can kind of see why I needed to kind of pick up all these other skill sets that you get by being a studio rock star.
Right.
It's like
Right.
it taught me what I started realizing is that, oh, I'm just not recording others. I'm actually learning about kind of the essence of existence, because sound and frequencies travel outside of just the musical realm. So, and then when you're dealing with people, it's in personalities, it's that's really, to me, where the rock star aspect comes into play, is how you work with others and how you achieve what you're all trying to set out to do. So that's really how my business was started. It was completely organic. Um, and then it just rained down. I absorbed it as every project, every session, every person was a gold mine of uniqueness. So I was being enriched one way or the other. And so I always just had gratitude along the whole way, and was just like, wow, this is cool, and this is cool. And being in LA, you meet people from all around the world. So
Hmm.
I'm not just doing certain things. It's just that's why when you read the variety of what I've done, that's just kind of the nature of the town. And
That's what I was struck by. I just felt like what a place to be where, you could run into somebody who's really into music, or you could run into somebody who just wants to be on the actor's stage, or you could run into somebody who's trying to, change the world through spiritual healing, and all those things will converge to come create art with you in a studio like that.
and right below the Hollywood sign, so to speak. You know what I mean? It was very
Yeah.
strange because I'm very much not a Hollywood person. Those were never my interest. I came to California for the geography of it all, basically the ocean, the mountains, the desert.
Yeah.
That's what brought me here. And then all of that, like being in Hollywood for as long as I was, 30 some odd years, I wasn't out doing any of the Hollywood stuff. I was in a studio being inundated with session after session after session, to where now I just look back and it's just a blur. It's
Yeah.
like, oh my,
As Frank Zappa would say, you're getting working on your studio tan.
completely. Yes. Although I did take time to get out and get the tan because, I am an outdoorsy kind of person. So that was always very important to me. But I always viewed myself because, I used to hear a lot of negative things, aspects about what Hollywood could be or whatever. But I always viewed myself as the heart of Hollywood, like it was all heart. The people I worked with, the sessions I did, to me, I viewed it as this is passionate. This is truthful. It means something to the people I'm working with. And so I learned to get a good attitude about it right away. I saw it as like, wow, this is kind of unique and special. So, and another cool thing to mention is that, and this is important for the studio rock stars out there, is that I was in a studio that was in a complex with about 18 other studios. And those other studios were not acoustically designed like the one that I had. These were rooms that people turned into workspaces, but they were functioning workspaces with high-end clientele. And and then across the street there's a studio. Down the block they're just everywhere. And the point I'm trying to convey here is that there is enough art and artists to go around where you can create your very own scene. Much like if you think of, the swirl of a hurricane, it's like, if you build it, they will come. And my clients didn't know my neighbor's clients, and vice versa. And some would and some wouldn't, but there was enough for everybody to get a bite.
Yeah,
And, and
that's a great reminder. I feel like I see that here in Nashville,
that's
too.
awesome.
When you sort
Yeah.
of step back and look at it, I'm always amazed at how I can discover whole new circles of music and people I didn't even know were here.
I
Yeah,
mean, that gives me chills when you say that, because to me, there's always been a magic to the arts, or at least the music, and capturing, like a take or a cut or whatever, and why this one gives me chills or this one doesn't, and all of that. There is this kind of untouchable, intangible that kind of shows up. And when you have these working studios side by side in a heart, no, without consternation, doing harmony, like it, then you have clients hanging out with other clients that, and then they're out talking and this kind of thing, and it just spreads. And all of a sudden you're referring your neighbor people, they're referring you people, and it's just a win-win-win equation is how I like to view it. You help your client, and first and foremost, and then that sets the tone that they know, hey, this person's got my back. They really they care about what I'm trying to do.
yeah,
I don't care if it's 10 years later. I've had people 10 years later contact me from some gesture I did to them before, to help them in some situation. So, that's why I always try to get people to be just help the client, whatever they need. If you have to send them somewhere else, don't worry about that. Help them out. It'll come back in one way or another if you keep the good vibes going. So
yeah, yeah, cool. Well, there's many clients that we could talk about here, but why don't we begin with an introduction to Winslow Court Studio, and tell us about the studio and the history.
okay, do you mean the actual physical history of the place, or do you mean like the actual business itself?
How
How?
about the physical history? Let's start by the building before you got
Okay.
there, because it's a great story, and then tell us about your experience there.
Okay, so first of all, when I got the place, I have to give a lot of credit to a very huge mentor for me, and this was my landlord over there. Because what had happened was I was in a band in another location, and we lost our place. So now I'm all of a sudden back at home with my 8-track in my bedroom, and I'm living in an apartment in West Hollywood, and I'm doing recordings in the bedroom. And in this time, it's about a year time, I'm looking for a new location, and I see an ad in what was called the Recycler, which was a local paper back then.
That's where I got my tape machine.
Beautiful. So I call an ad, and it's just some guy on the phone, and we have a conversation, and he tells me, "Hey, I got this space, and and it sounds great, and I'm like, okay. So we set a meeting for the following morning. I'm supposed to come see it. So okay. About an hour before the meeting, he calls me and he goes, "I'm terribly sorry to have to tell you this, but I had to give that space to somebody else that I've been doing business with for a few years." And and at this point in my mind, I'm just like, whatever, dude,
Right, right.
but basically what he's laying out is some loyalty. So it's like, okay, fine. And what he says to me is, he goes, "I'm going to keep your name at the top of the list, and the next time something opens up, you're the first person I'll call." And I was, yeah, okay, whatever. Literally a year later, I get a phone call from this guy going, "Hi, you probably don't remember me or whatever." And I still hadn't found the place, so I'm still working out of my bedroom. I'm not having clients, but I'm doing music and doing my own thing, looking for a bigger space.
Mhm.
He calls me and he goes, "Yeah, well, I got a space. It's quite a bit bigger than what we had talked about before, but I told you you're first on the list. So if you want to come see it." So I'm like, okay, I go and see it. And the best way I could describe this to you is like Greg Brady's bedroom. It was like orange shag carpet, and just these weird colors. And he brings me into the studio from the back way, because there's already a tenant in there. So part of the rooms are locked and I can't see, but he's walking me through the place, giving me the essence. And I'm just like, it just spoke to me. I mean, I could not believe what I was standing in, and there was no way I could afford it. So I was like, oh man, how do I make this work? I tell him I really, really want it. And so I call a friend of mine who was into ADR stuff, Foley, and because the room was a Foley room. And for those who don't know, that means the floor opens up with pits with different surfaces
Oh,
that
wow.
that and on the wall there's a big screen, and the idea is that they're doing sound for films after the fact. So if somebody's running through the woods, or somebody's walking on a western walking on hardwood planks, or whatever it may be, this room is designed for that. So in the floor it opens up and there's all the pits. So anyways, I have a film
Fascinating.
friend. I get him on board. Him and I go back to like the 7th grade. So I get him on board and he's my partner, and that's how I got the space. And then because I was in a band, I could get the other people to pitch in. And so that's how it started. So that's how I acquired the space. So the first 4 years or so that I had it, from 97 to 2000, 2001, I was not interested in recording other people. I mean, I was just doing my band and maybe a friend here and there. But then it just expanded, and around 2000, 2001 is when it just started raining down, when I got a Pro Tools rig. So what happened was I signed up with the Studio Referral Service, which was a local place. They came and checked me out to see all the things that I had and all of that, to make sure I was a legitimate location.
Mhm.
And they started referring people to me. And I remember the very first session that they sent to me. Now, remember, I'm on a 16-track 2-inch. Okay, I get this session, and it's a Pro Tools. It's a digital session. I don't have a Pro Tools rig. I've never worked on the computer. I have no skill with that at all. I got and the gig, I have to mention, was for a guy named David Wilson, who was Henry Mancini's solo violinist. Okay, this
Wow.
guy was phenomenal, and what they wanted to do was track basics on 16-track 2-inch, and then transfer the files, convert the files for a Logic situation at another studio. So I was doing all the bed tracks. Okay,
Mhm.
so so do I want this gig? So I had 5 days. I got a Pro Tools rig and I learned it in 5 days. It was a nightmare. I'll tell you why. Well, I mean, it was incredible, but it was like, the thing I remember most about this is that I remembered the physiology in my face change from sitting in front of a screen for days. I felt like my face, it just changed. I could feel like, because coming off of the screen, this is before I learned about, different types of screens, radiation levels, things of this nature.
Sure.
And so I felt my biology change. That's what I remember most, although not sleeping and all of the other tensions and headaches you could imagine. But it was really a straight transfer. So all I needed to do was, how do I sync 8 tracks? Because I only had 8 converters, right? So I had a 16-track 2-inch.
What was the Pro Tools rig you got? Was it the Digio 1?
It was exactly that. Yeah, it was the Digio 1. Yeah, and I went and I leased it, and I basically learned it in 5 days to be able to. I learned enough to be able to create, to sync 8 tracks and to bring them across in a group. So, because what I was going to have to do was transfer everything twice, because I could only take in 8 at a time, right? And I got 16 tracks. So first I transferred the first 8 tracks, then I locked them as a group. Then I transferred 9 through 16, locked them as a group. Then I synced all 16 tracks together, and then exported the files that would be Mac PC compatible, and they could load them in over at the Logic, the Logic setup at a different location.
Yeah.
So that was a heavy week for me, and it went great. And then, of course, that guy turned out to be one of my. He's a friend of mine to this day. I've done several records with him. So
that's cool.
Yeah, it was a wonderful experience. But that's really how that got the wheels going. And then it's like, okay, I'm doing this. So, and at that point, I didn't have a day job or anything. It was now this is going to be how I'm going to try and survive. So it kind of came out of nowhere that I'm going to start a business. And Winslow Court Studio, I didn't even name the studio. I wrote a piece of music. That's the street I grew up on. So I wrote a piece of music that I recorded on my 8-track in that West Hollywood bedroom. And the band I was in, the singer, loved this piece of music that I wrote. And I called it Winslow Court because I just called it home. He didn't know what that meant. And one day I showed up to the studio and he had a special custom sign, like an old ice cream shop from the 20s, painted, had it made for the door, and it said Winslow Court Studio. And I was like, well, I guess that's the name. And I was like,
That's great.
I was like, yeah. So he didn't know what it meant, but it just worked out perfectly. So, and then it just became my legitimate business.
With so many game-changing isotope plugins to choose from, deciding which one to buy next could be a bit of a challenge. But did you know that now you can have all their plugins through iZotope's affordable subscription bundle, Music Production Suite Pro, for only $19.99 per month? Get your Rockstar extended 30-day free trial subscription now at iZotope.com/rockstars and use the code ROCK10 to get 10% off any individual plugin purchase. Before your band hits the studio, it's smart to have all the songs and notes in one place. But setting up a shared cloud folder can be frustrating. There's always somebody in the band who can't seem to log in or wants to use a different platform. Not so with Samply. It's easy to add collaborators to a project so the whole band can upload new songs and make comments before the session. Just upload your voice memo or mix and start collaborating. Sign up for your free account with 2 projects now at samplyaudio.com or use the coupon code RSR20 to get 20% off the first 3 months. And that's similar to my story in that somebody else named my studio as well when I was working with Pat Sansone, who has gone on to be in the band Wilco.
Uh-huh.
He was over here, and I used to go collect toys from the thrift store, but if you rewind a little bit, maybe our mornings used to be like, get a coffee, go to the used consignment music store, or stop by the thrift store and see what cool stuff there was. So I would do that. And anytime I'd ever see any toy that made any kind of sound or music related or anything, I'd just get it. So I just started collecting it. So he was like, dude, you should call this place the Toy Box. And it stuck.
Beautiful.
But he didn't make me a sign. Come on, Pat.
You owe him a sign. Yeah.
Well, that's cool. Yeah, keep going.
Grateful. Well, anyway, so now I'm basically, word starting to spread, around the area, and I'm doing all these unique local, type bands, friends of friends, and this kind of stuff. It's all just personal referrals from customers and whatnot. And then it really changed in 2003 when all of a sudden I get a call from a guy named Jack Temption. And for those who don't know who Jack Tempchin is, he's a kind of a prolific songwriter, and probably best known for writing the song "Peaceful Easy Feeling" for the Eagles.
Oh, right on.
And co-writing "Already Gone" for the Eagles, which of course, just those two right there. I mean, for the longest period of time, the Eagles had the greatest selling record of all time. And he had two of those songs
Wow.
that he wrote on it. And I mean, his list just goes on and on, whether it's Slow Dancing, Swaying to the Music, Smuggler's Blues, You Belong to the City, it just on and on and on. So he calls me, and I actually knew his name from a childhood music book that we had around the house back in the 70s, and I used to look through it all the time, and I would see his name. So when he said his name, it was like instantly bringing me back to my childhood bedroom and seeing it in that book. And I'm like, I know who you are. That's why, because he, like I said, he talked to me for a little bit. He found me out of the phone book or a internet search.
Wow.
Yeah, just incredible fate. And basically, he was already working at a different location, and they were having issues, and so he was looking for a new spot, and he just happened to call me, stumbled upon me, and he booked a session with me, and he asked me to put together a rhythm section for him. So I'm like, okay. So, I hire a couple of my friends who were both heavy hitters. One was the drummer in a band called Remy Zero. His name was Gregory Slay. And the other guy was a guy named Jurgen, who's basically just a huge session player. And last I knew, he was playing with Thin Lizzy. So
Nice.
the latest carnation. So two very unusual players, but great players. And I'm like, okay, I'll get these guys to come in and they were available. I hired them. And so we got this session, and nobody shows up. So here I got a drummer all ready to go. I got a bass, so everybody's set up, and nothing. And it was like an hour and a half, and I'm thinking, oh, I got played. Somebody played me here, and I'm going to have to pay these guys for their time and whatever. And I'm really sorry and all this kind of stuff. And then like one of my neighbors comes and he's like, hey, Craig, there's some dude out in the parking lot trying to find you. So I go out there, and there he is. And so Jack and I, like, Winslow Court was the perfect place for him at the right time. And all of it, he had a great experience. We had a great session. We cut a song in that first session. And then after that, he started booking me literally, I'm going to tell you, about 12 days a month for about 4 years on or off. Like every time he was in town, because he lives down south, but he has a place here in town. And Jack, because of who he was, and he was in a big band in the 70s called the Funky Kings. And Clive Davis said that was his greatest group that didn't go where he thought it was going to go. So Jack is at that level where he works with Glenn Frey, he works with Jackson Browne, he works with Clive, all of these guys. So now, instead of me dealing with the local friends of friends and this kind of stuff, playing, the clubs and whatnot, now I got this guy who's bringing in heavyweights, top session players, top writers. I just kind of become his place, as well as others. And so that was enormous for me getting off the ground, because Jack brought just session after session, and that gave me credibility and gave me, I had to step up my game extremely fast. Because you're dealing with people where mistakes are not a part of it. Now, mistakes, of course, can occur, but you just have to really be on the top of your game. So it happened so fast with Jack that basically, so I just mentioned Jack, and then what Jack did, I ended up cutting 2 records with him, but I also cut over 300 titles with him outside of the 2 records we released. Okay, so I was his songwriting workshop in a lot of ways. And just all of these wonderful experiences with all these jam sessions and whatnot. But within the first month and a half that I was working with Jack, he brought in a guy named Greg Leese. Now, Greg Leese is another just heavyweight. He's in like the Musicians Hall of Fame. He's played with absolutely everybody as a utility kind of player, from, pedal steel and just all, a utility guy. He just can do everything. And he's also a producer. So he used to play in Jack's band called the Funky Kings in the 70s. And so
Nice.
Jack says to me one day, "Hey, I'm my old guitar player is doing a session here over at Sunset Sound today, and I'm calling him over here after, because we used to do evening sessions, all-nighters. That's what Jack liked to do. We'd start sessions at like 9 or 10 at night and go to sunup.
Wow.
That was our schedule. So, Greg's in the studio all day over there, and then Jack's like, "Hey, come on over," and he told me, he goes, "Look, he's going to come here. He's not going to want to play. So I want to have a rig set up for him, dialed in, ready to go, so I can just put a guitar in his hand so he cannot get the chance to say no."
Right.
So this is one of those this is just total luck that this occurs. So I'm a guitar player, and I have half stacks, not combos, half stacks with heads.
Mm-hmm.
These guys are combo players. So anyways, I have a half stack set up. And I basically, I amp farm my half stack. He's playing through a half stack, but I'm also amp farming it. So I'm altering it in the control room. And I just happened to say the right name to him. And what it was is, when he walked through the door, I just said, "Hello," put a guitar in his hand. And I said, I dialed up the sound kind of a la Johnny Guitar Watson.
Nice.
That was the key that I didn't understand the importance of, because Greg produced a guy named Dave Elvin from the Blasters. And Dave Elvin always tells Greg, "I want it to sound like Johnny Guitar Watson." So, no, just forget everything I said. Now they're just in the mood. They're just jamming. They're having fun. They're just, going off, and I'm recording it or whatever. So it's towards the middle or end of the night. He comes in and listens to, playback, and he's like, "God, that sounds great," all this kind of stuff. And he says to me, he goes, "Hey, you ever heard of a guy named Dave Elvin?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I know who he is, because the Cream magazines, that we grew up with in the 70s and 80s, the Blasters, the Roots Americana band, always put a black and white ad in the back of that magazine. And I would always see the rockers in the magazine, and then, why are these greaser biker looking dudes from the 50s in this magazine?" It always stuck to me. So I always paid attention to that. So they were relentless with their advertising. So anyways, he says to me, "Have you ever heard of this guy?" And I go, "Yeah, I know who he is." And he goes, "Well, I might be able to bring a project of his here." So anyways, I'm just, yeah, whatever, I'm just great. It's just more possibilities. Well, within a month or so after that, so you remember, Jack comes to me in September of 2003. Greg Lease is at my place, and Bob Glaub, Don Heffington, within the next month. That's a A-list bass player and drummer. And then in December, now I'm doing pre-production for Dave Elvin's record, The Ash Grove. And now I've done like 14 records with Dave over the last 18 years. You see, It just came out of nowhere. And not only that, we've done radio shows, we've done so much work together. And it just happened from a guy who stumbled across my studio one day and just opened up the floodgates with who he knew, because I was taking care of him. He just kept raining down, artists on me and referrals. And I mean, that's what kept me going. And it started everything at a much bigger level. And every time one of those session guys would come in, then they would start referring clients to me, because, artists talk to session players like, "Well, where do you guys think we should do this kind of thing?" All those discussions that happen. So now those session guys are referring people to me.
This show is sponsored by Recording Studio Rockstars Academy, where you can go to take your recording, mixing, and mastering to the next level. And you can start right now with my free Introduction to Mixing course, Mix Master Bundle. This course will show you how to get pro-sounding mixes from your home studio with free and stock plugins in Pro Tools. And the best part is that these mixing techniques will work for you in any DAW, whether you're in Logic, Cubase, PreSonus Studio One, Reaper, or anything you can think of. Are you ready to make your best record ever? Then go to mixmasterbundle.com to get started for free now, or look for the clickable link in the show notes of this episode. The first time I heard a Carl Tatz Phantom Focus mix room featuring the PFM HD1000 master reference monitors, I was blown away. It was like listening to 3D holographic audio where I could reach out and touch the instruments with rock solid bass down to 20 hertz. It was awesome. And now I've got one of my very own at the Toy Box Studio in East Nashville. What's amazing is that the Phantom Focus system can be implemented in your existing control room too, or even your bedroom studio, giving you world-class sound. Go see how cool your studio could look and sound at phantomfocus.com. Absolutely. And, part of the thing, I talked about this recently on the podcast was, this idea that if you make the musicians sound great, well, then they're going to want to record. They're going to want to bring whatever project they're doing over to your studio because you make them sound great.
Yeah, well, I don't know if I would say I make them sound great, but I can tell you I do everything in my power to make them feel great.
Right.
And the reason I say that is because that takes me back again to those early days when I was growing up and my father was a barbershop quartet singer and they would have rehearsals at the house.
Did he have a barber shop also?
No.
Make them look great?
Nope, he didn't. But they would do that, all the wardrobe and all that look and all, they were lock, stock with the whole thing. It was.
That's great.
Yeah, the outfits and everything. So, but I would always pay attention to the hosting skills of my parents when people would come around, and so I learned that art very early of the importance of providing a comfortable atmosphere for people when they walk through the door. And so I really spent my attention on that more so than mic placement and things, because for whatever reason, and I don't say this as a bragging thing or anything like that, it's just how I am, is that I've always felt natural with the instruments where they kind of talk to me at a biological level. Like I feel like, oh, there it is. Like if you put your hands together, you clasp your hands and they come together like a glove, like, oh, there's the spot. It feels most comfortable. That's how it is when I put a mic in front of a speaker. It's like I can almost feel that.
I'm clasping my hands right now and trying that out.
Yeah, there's a place where they rest real comfortably where it's like, yeah, that's the spot. Well, when I put a 421 over a tom, that's what I do. I can almost feel it in the air. I know that sounds silly, but that's what I do. And then I go and listen. And if something seems off, then I'll move it. But otherwise, the instinct I found as I sharpened them, as time went on, it wasn't originally like that. I had to, it just kind of took me over that way. I did all the technical stuff at first, trying to do this, trying to do that from something you read or whatever. But eventually I got beyond that to a way where there just kind of became an innate knowing. And then I would always defer to the ear of the client or the player. So first I go by my innate knowing, and then I let them hear, unless I can hear something right away, like, oh, there's a rattle, or there's, something obvious. And then I would always let them decide. So really, I would cradle my clients to just really let them know that your comfort matters to me, and I'm here to make sure we get done what we're here to get done in the most, time efficient way as possible. And I think I wore that attitude on my sleeve, and that rubbed off on them, as well as if I couldn't deliver sonically, of course, it's like, hey, it sounds like crap, like that's a given. But I didn't have that. I was lucky because I had an historic room that it didn't matter what style of music you were doing in there. It just ended up working because there was these giant, if like the way the studio was designed, it had these diffusers on the wall that were about, I would say, 7 feet in width, each diffuser, that would go from the floor all the way to the ceiling. And
what are they made out of?
There was always a mystery material. I never found out. In fact, different people would always come in and try and test and figure out what it was that they used, that they made the stuff out of. But, I don't know. I just know that it was acoustically designed by the engineers of the day 100 years back, and they knew what they were doing.
Wow. It was
So
probably, I wonder if it's the same kind of almost like linoleum stuff that they made my Victrola horn out of, which would have been about 1907.
it's possible. It didn't seem like any normal material. It was always a mystery to me. Like
Yeah.
and others when they'd come in, it was just we just scratch our head. But the way these things were set up was it made it so you could do a live band in a small space and get total separation because the reflections kind of canceled out and gave safe pockets in the room in certain
Wow.
yeah. So just really useful type things. So
Well,
uh,
before we switch on to the next topic, tell us a little bit more about making the artist feel comfortable. So first of all, I'm completely with you on this idea that I also have found, though I haven't voiced it so eloquently, that sometimes I just have a sense of where a mic should go on something. I just get this energy feeling about it. And then, you learn to listen and you may adjust and stuff like that as you need to. But I think that's a really cool reminder that we should just trust ourselves about some of that stuff, because we'll probably pick something that's probably pretty good and work with it. But do talk about the ways that you made an artist feel comfortable. Like, for example, in my studio, I like to make sure that there's coffee in the coffee machine, and I like to always go. And if we're about to do a day session, it's like there better be fresh apples and bananas and some, clementine oranges in the fruit bowl or some just simple things like that.
You said it, and that is the key. Originally, when I started out, I was throwing out the sodas and the sugar and the candies and the snacks and all of this, and I would see very quickly what that was doing to others, and switch to the full-blown organic fruits, nuts, vegetables, veggie platters. I made coffee for 20 years. I've never had a glass in my life except one when I was a little kid. So it's everything you just said. I tried to make the bath because I had a small space. There was multiple rooms, but it could get congested real quick.
Hmm.
So the sort of techniques I would use would be I would always do as much prep work as I could for the client before anybody even arrived. And that was always on me. I took that time. I'd spend an hour, 2 hours prepping for the session before the clock started, so to speak. And you get rewarded for that gesture, tenfold in other ways. So there would be many times where I'd be bitter going, man, I'm here 2 hours before and 2 hours after. But that's what it took. It was that tenacity and attitude that the others they sensed it. They knew that. So that was where the merit came from. But just to be specific, I just tried to have everything as best I could set up beforehand, in terms of stations for each person. I would definitely have coffee on for sure. And then the variants, they got fresh water, they have fresh coffee, they have, varying snacks that will keep them energized and motivated as opposed to ups and downs.
Right.
And then what I did was in my restroom, I tried to make that like a spa type situation. So it was very, very different from being in the lounge and anywhere else when they
Hot
walked in
steam
there.
towels.
No, no, something is. I would have if I could have, but no, something. It was just in the ambience and the decor. I had a very special stylized sink that was very kind of nice and soothing. And when you saw it, it was like, wow, you don't really see things like this. And the lighting and it just the vibe of the restroom. There's a picture on my website of a guy named Jimmy Dale Gilmore. He's taking a selfie in that restroom.
Oh, that's funny.
And in the restroom, painted on the wall in reverse, so when you saw it in the mirror, it was normal. It said, "Music is the best," which of course is a Frank Zappa quote from Joe's Garage. And so I had that painted there. So anybody who's standing in the bathroom, looking in this giant mirror with this great ambience and a super cool sink or whatever, very nicely written behind them, they would see music is the best. And that's not much, but it was the best I could do for what I had. And it was enough where people would come out and say, "Oh, I love your bathroom," or "Oh, that sink is cool," or whatever. You know what I mean? So
Nice. Right on, man. Right on.
so
Right on.
it was things like that, just small vibe things where it just gave them a little something that they weren't expecting. Outside of that, it was all attitude and attention to detail and service,
So you just finished an awesome mix and sent it off to the band. But the singer texts you with lyric changes, the drummer emails you wanting a different fill, and the bass player DMs you about a wrong note in the chorus. But which mix version were they talking about anyway? Don't you wish there was an easier way? Samply comes to the rescue as your ultimate mix assistant, streaming high-quality mixes so that your clients can easily listen and send notes from their mobile phone on the road or the computer back at the studio. All mix comments are time-stamped directly onto the correct mix version with no confusion, and everything is easy to find in one location. No more missed mix messages from the band. Phew! Sign up for your free account with 2 projects now at samplyaudio.com and use the coupon code RSR20 to get 20% off for the first 3 months when you're ready to upgrade. Look, I love using iZotope plugins for my music and podcast productions. In fact, you're hearing Ozone and RX on my voice in this podcast episode. And now you can get access to all the iZotope plugins through the subscription bundle. For only $19.99 per month, Music Production Suite Pro is designed for the serious recording, mixing, and mastering engineer, putting the finishing touches on music, film, and podcasts with fully pro versions of Ozone, RX, Neutron, Nectar, Neoverb, Tonal Balance Control, Visual Mixer, and more, including free plugin updates. And just for you rock stars, get an extended 30-day free trial subscription at iZotope.com/rockstars and use the code ROCK10 to get 10% off any individual plugin purchase. Coupon not valid for subscription. Hey, Rockstars, we're back now for the jam session. My guest today is Craig Parker Adams, joining us from Winslow Ct Studios in Los Angeles. Or you may actually, I don't believe you're in the studio right now, and there may be more to learn about that. But Craig, you ready to jam?
I am. Let's jam.
All right, dude. So that's very cool. Love hearing about the studio, and I love hearing about your way of welcoming everybody. And you talked about setting up before a session and stuff like that. Are there other things that you want to talk about in terms of just managing a session flow and making sure that clients feel really, really comfortable? You specifically refer to your philosophy of focusing on the comfort of the client and then trusting that the sound will come from that, right?
Absolutely. Part of the reason I came to that was that the studio was the type of space that I literally saw people walk through the threshold and go, "Oh, wow, this is it." Like I saw them be affected by the feel without nothing to do with me. They just walked in and the space would speak to them. Now, that's what I kind of loved most about the place, is because I knew it was an energized spot. I mean, there was, just think of what it must have gone down in those, between those walls in the 80 years or so before I got a hold of it.
Any good stories you remember hearing about?
Well, because nobody really knew the exact history of the place before. It was always like, "Oh, I heard it was this, I heard it was that," but there was never any concrete of, "Oh, I was here before," or it was always like a guessing game.
We don't know which movies were made. It'd be so cool to go back and see one of the old films.
Well, I know that the movie 10 was done in there in terms of the, the post-production, because the facility.
With Bo Derek, that one?
Well, yeah, but hear me out. So what it was is that in the 70s, in the 80s, the place was called Scott Sound, which was a television production center, which was owned by Bruce Scott, who was the co-creator of Time Code.
Wow. Hold on. I can tell you what that means, because I learned that one from Frank Zappa, Society of Motion Picture and Television Engineers.
There you go. So because of that, and it was a family affair. And what happened is the oldest pictures I have that are posted on the website of the space were brought to me by his daughter, by his stepdaughter. So she grew up in that building doing sessions with her father on films. And so they did the film 10. That's one of the ones that she mentioned there. So she used to have, because in my space, right next to, so my control room used to work 2 rooms. So the space I had was the Foley tracking room, and then, a lounge, an upstairs projection room, a restroom, some other rooms. But my control room had a wood wall on the back wall, and that wood wall blocked the control room glass that looked into an orchestra size room,
Wow.
or what they called the mixing theater. So they had a full size movie screen, and so they would, because they're doing films, movies, so they have a full size theater in the place to mix the audio for the films and watch the films.
That's great.
And then they could also do orchestra sessions in there. Now that was also in between RCA, Columbia, and Scott Sound. George Liberace's brother, ran. He owned it, and
Yeah,
he
know
had
anything about that.
he had Spectrasonics. That was his company out of there, and so they used that.
Wait,
room.
Spectrasonics. You mean Spectrasonics? I think of making the C610.
Spectre Sound. That's the name of his company.
I gotcha. Spectre Sound. Okay, great.
Yes, and there's a great photo of George out in front of the place in the 50s. Yeah, so Spectre Sound, and that was his. He had a production company out of there. So the studio just had so many uses over the years, until ultimately, after Bruce Scott sold it, then it was just owned by a local, guy who just owns a lot of properties and whatnot, and basically that's who I was leasing from for all the years that I had it. So, but so it was a magical space, and it was a live living space, and it was also, for those that go for this or that, it was a haunted space in a good way. There were things that occurred there that clients had physical altercations. Clients had physical, viewings, seeing things. And then for me, I'm not a seer, I'm a feeler. So I never, all my years there, I could feel all the time, but I wasn't a seer. So to hear the stories, I mean, I remember a session I was doing with John Doe and Exene on this record called The Knitters, the modern sounds of the Knitters. And she's doing a vocal take on the other side of the glass. John and I are sitting, at the desk, at the console, and she's just right on the other side. And all of a sudden, in the middle of the vocal take, all of her papers and everything off her music stand just go flying up into the air.
That's great.
And we're just like, what the? And she keeps doing the take, right? And so the take's done. And I'm like, what just happened there? She's like, this place is haunted, isn't it? And I'm like, what? And now I knew it was by this time, because somebody had already had a sighting, and they told me what they saw. And I said, yeah, but she's supposed to be friendly or whatever. And she goes, well, she just kicked me and knocked over all my stuff, and I don't appreciate it. And I was like, what? And then she just walks back, she takes over. She walks around. She comes into the control room. John and I are sitting there looking at her, and she's totally fine. I go, you seem pretty fine for just having a physical altercation with a ghost. And she goes, I see ghosts all the time. She just rubbed it off like nothing, right? Then like 6 months later, I'm doing her solo record, right? And now this all comes from Jack. This is a lineage from Jack to Greg to Dave to just on and on and on. So this is all referral. You can trace them all back. So I just finished this Knitters record after I did the Dave Alvin record. Then he brings me this Knitters record, which is a side project of his. And then I do that. And then Exene brings me a solo record of hers for her band, The Original Sinners. So now she books me for 3 weeks, and they set up cameras for 3 weeks. There's cameras constantly taking pictures throughout the studio, because she's trying to catch photos of the ghosts.
Right.
And so there's all these orb photos and all this stuff from all these years. And one day she comes in on that record, and I was sitting there having my lunch. She walks in and she goes, the ghost is gone. And I said, okay. And that was that. Now there was more experiences later, but I just share that. It was just unique. And, so there was wild experiences, but the energy was always wonderful there, and you could feel it. And so when people walked through the door and they would go, wow, I would just love that. It would reinforce the whole thing, and it just kept everything going. So the building really, to me, gets the credit. And I was just the lucky schlub that happened to be there at that time to be able to to learn and help others get done what they needed to do. And while I was doing that, I didn't realize it at the time. It took a little bit, but I just realized I am getting so enriched by all of these unique people and their art, because it's just incredible to be in those situations. And so I just started learning that I need to facilitate total comfort. So when they come, people would come in like, oh, traffic was this or that. It's like, I am going to alleviate that from that individual within the first few minutes. That is
Nice.
you walk through, forget everything. We're
Especially in
here.
LA. You want people to
Expect,
forget about traffic and stress pretty quick.
yeah. So that's really where I put all my attention to, and that's kind of why, to me, this is when when we're thinking of beyond the notes. To me, it's like, to get to the notes, you got to go beyond the notes, because if you facilitate the right atmosphere, because a lot of it is waiting for it to arrive. And I remember a very important lesson I'll share for the rock stars that I learned very early on, and it was through that guy Greg Lease, when he brought me the Dave Alvin Ash Grove record.
Mm-hmm.
And he was doing guitar tracks, overdubs, and we were doing 13, 15-hour type days. Okay. And this is why him and I hit it off, is because I had no problem working that amount of time. It's like, let's do it, whatever it takes. I'm in. I was stoked to be, I had the energy for that.
You're still a single individual, not a family guy with kids at this point or anything?
I am, yeah. No, even at this point, I have no children, but I did at that time. I was with my wife, who, 18 years we've been together. So
Mm-hmm.
I had also met her the same year that I met Jack and those guys, and she's been my biggest supporter. So my
Great.
wife is just totally on my side with everything that I've learned with the clients and all of that. So we have the right kind of relationship that works perfectly for that, and she's been a rock in that sense. So
That's
I'm
great.
just,
We're gonna say it. We're gonna just publicly say it here. Your wife rocks, man.
yeah, she rocks. She rocks. Maria
It
rocks.
was said. There it was on Recording Studio Rockstars.
So Greg, what I learned is we were doing, he was on the hunt. And so first of all, I didn't even view it like this yet. I didn't even view it like a hunt. I was just, at this point, I was like getting a little internally frustrated, because it was kind of take after take after take. And I'm thinking, and everything the guy does is like incredible. So, this is my viewpoint of it. And
Yeah.
so I'm sitting there in this going like, what are you, it's like, that was perfect. This is perfect. Like, and inside I'm having this internal dialogue with myself, and I learned that he's hunting for something that I cannot see. And I didn't understand that, because I'm sensitive. I can see everything. But no, there are others that are far more sensitive than you ever dreamed of. And so I was sitting there, he's playing this incredible, on the hunt, until eventually something showed up where he's like, that's what it was going for. And what I realized was that what this guy specializes in is finding the heart of the song and grabbing it, taking it, and making it his own, and kind of expanding it in some way, or maybe not expanding it, but um, identifying it
Hmm.
and accentuating it. And so I'm sitting here watching this guy do take after take, and it's like, it's not about that. He's in a totally different headspace. He's searching for something that I can't see. And I learned the lesson of stand down and be patient, and try and pick up the very sensitivities of what the artist is hunting for. And in that, there's all sorts of gems, wisdoms. It's quantum. It's not just face value. It's quantum, what you pick up from standing down, listening tighter, and let this person lead you somewhere that you can't see.
That's great.
And then they bring you someplace, and then you're like, oh, now I get it. So that was a huge thing for me to learn, just on a patience level, and just on I don't know it all level, and I can't feel everything level. So And also I'd put on top of that to the age old adage of never judging a book by its cover. You don't know
Right.
if a kid's going to give you that gift, or I mean, just whatever scenario you want to paint. It doesn't matter what the individual is that gives you that. It's just possible that you can experience it from any individual.
And you bring up an important thing, a lesson I had to learn too, is in the studio when you're engineering, there is a lot of time. You spend a lot of time just sitting and you listen to the same thing over and over again. And sometimes the easy path to take is the one inside your own head where you start having a dialogue with yourself. And that shit can really bring you down. You can really
Mm-hmm.
start creating a drama, or you can play out a dialogue between you and the other person you're working with, or things like that. And it amplifies. So you have to
Yes,
watch out for that. I had to learn how to watch out for that.
yeah, that's what for the rock stars out there. For if you haven't experienced that or understand that, make that a focal point for you, because you will be so enriched when you get that skill set. I mean, it is a massive skill set, because then those type of people, those artists who are at that sensitive level, they can sense when you're frustrated. If they're hunting for the heart of a song in a way that you can't imagine, you can be sure they know when you're feeling like impatient or this kind of stuff.
Hmm. Hmm.
So,
And
what?
yeah,
Go
and
ahead.
the other thing is, another takeaway from that is, so you're right. So somebody that you're working with, they're in the studio. If they're putting in that much time into it, why do you think they're there putting that much time into it? Of course, they're searching for something that's meaningful to them. And you don't know what that is until they discover it, until you get there. And the other part of that equation too is just remembering to recognize that if you are feeling frustrated, if you're feeling impatient, if you're feeling hungry, if you're feeling whatever, like that's legit too. You will do the people you work with a service the sooner you learn how to recognize your own limitations and communicate those in a helpful, effective, productive way, instead of like a passive aggressive way, or like reverting to that internal dialogue. You obviously you hit a button for me there, Craig. So I had some things to say, but I think that's really important. And it's like you're saying, it's the sooner we learn the techniques to take every aspect of the session and point it in a positive direction towards that solution that the client, the artist, is going for, the better. Whether it's our own limitations or whether it's helping them work through their limitations.
Yeah, I would say masterminding in a chess-like fashion, is the skill that ends up being boiled down to, for the person running the business, handling the studio, handling the clients. You are masterminding things in a way that you're not necessarily maybe speaking about in terms of like what we just said, like or what we were talking about before in terms of setting the ambiance and things like that. Like you're consciously doing that because you want them to have a certain experience when they walk in. Their mind's not thinking that when they walk in. They're just thinking, oh, there's coffee. Oh, the bathroom is clean, or oh, I can have this. I can, like, they're not thinking, wow, this guy really went out of. They'll get to that, but not initially. They're just you're already leading them in a way that they're not thinking about. You're taking over. So do you know what I mean by that? In other words,
Yeah.
they're not, the bass player's not thinking that on the way to the session. He might be thinking, I hope they have some food there, but he's not thinking as soon as he walks in, oh my God, my station's ready to, this, like, they're thinking about the session. They're thinking about what they're,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So you got to have their back in those other ways. And Lidge, if it's okay, I'd love to give you one other thing from that same time period that was super,
Absolutely.
super huge. Okay, so check this out. So this is back around that same time period, and I'm doing a really wonderful session, completely different style of music, just a total other world from the world that I had mentioned before. So it's just a totally another thing. I got a heavyweight, heavy hitter drummer in, we're I'm the artist, and we're doing drum tracks, rhythm tracks on a record. And I had an epiphany where when I was miking his drums, it just all of a sudden hit me. Am I miking the drums, or am I miking the environment that the drums are in? And I never thought of it that way before. That, I know you can say, well, yeah, you put up the room mics, you put up the close mics. Yeah, I was doing that, but I wasn't thinking of it. Am I miking the drums or am I miking the environment? So when I had that, I started miking the room in a totally different way than I was doing prior to that. And I don't know how big a deal that is for anybody, if that's an epiphany or not. It was for me. But I just want to share that. If you've ever thought of that when you're miking up the kit or anything else, am I miking the instrument or am I miking the environment the instrument's in, or am I doing both?
Or are we miking the drummer?
Well,
Or are we miking the individual? I don't know.
exactly. I mean, there's just exactly. I mean, I think you kind of put out a point there. It's like you just got all these variables and there's options. Be open to them. Just stretching your mind. For me, it was just it made my mind go out one phase further, where it's
Yeah.
like, oh, now I'm not just thinking of this. Now I'm thinking of this, and as you expand, you get that bird's eye view. The more you can see things that you couldn't see before as you expand. So that was a huge epiphany. So for the new rock stars out there that might not be thinking like that, have that into consideration.
Well,
Whether just something to consider. I just
yeah.
wanted to share
Well,
that.
you keep bringing up that you're a visual, you're a seer. So I don't know if you studied visual art at all, but one of the very first practices you do when you start studying visual art is you like, let's say you're going to draw a figure, a person standing there. You look at, or a chair. Let's say you're going to draw a stool. We'll pick a stool. You're going to draw a stool, but instead of drawing a stool, you do a practice where you say, "Oh, now just draw the negative space." So you intentionally look at the spaces that are not the stool and you try and draw those, and you end up with this really cool version of a stool. So to me, when I hear you say that, that's exactly what comes to mind. It's like, how can we record the negative space in our studio instead of the
Mhm.
positive space, to rethink how we're doing it. What were some of the things, like, do you remember anything specific, like when you first thought about, oh, am I miking the space around the drums? Like, did you grab a mic and move it to a new location and try something out?
Eventually, I did. Eventually, I went to a meeting over at the Grammy Museum with Eddie Kramer, Andy Johns, and the guy who recorded Kashmir. You got to forgive me for it because his name slips my mind at the moment, but it was all about recording John Bonham.
Right, right.
And and I used to, I mean, I fancied myself a good engineer with a good room and a good setup to track drums. It's what I love to do. I like to think of myself as like a failed drummer. Even though I've been a guitarist my whole life, I did try out for drums when I was a kid, and I couldn't. They didn't accept me because I couldn't get the stick to bounce. And then half hour later, when I get home, I'm making toast and I'm bouncing the knife on the thing, and I could get it to go, but in the class I couldn't do it. So, anyways. So in that experience, hearing those guys, all the different, situations that they talked about, I immediately went back to my space and I recorded. I had a drummer come in who, this great guy, his name's Tommy Holt, plays with Biohazard, and he used to play these big, giant, custom little Ludwig drums, like huge, probably a 28-inch kick, like ride cymbal that was probably 26 inches, huge, giant drums. And I was always trying to catch his sound, but I didn't have the skill down because you have to record bigger drums in a different way than you do smaller drums. They don't come across the same way. So I ended up he helped me out by kindly coming in and being the guy to play in the center of the room. And I literally mic'd walked my whole entire space with one mic and recorded every inch of the space from floor to ceiling, from left to right, top down my hallway, out just everywhere, and was able to catch some really amazing things that I didn't hear before. And that
Yeah.
taught me right away, like, oh, these three spots in the room are great for catching the bottom end. And you would never expect where they were. Like if you would have walked in the room and go, now where do you think the best low end would be if we put the drums here? You just would never pick these spots. And so once I found those, once I decided to go on that adventure, then I really, really learned my space.
OWC now brings you the Mini Stack STX, the world's first Thunderbolt Force certified storage and hub expander, perfectly sized to seamlessly stack with the Mac Mini and the ideal storage and connectivity companion for Thunderbolt or USB equipped computers and devices. With a universal SATA HDD SSD bay and NVMe M.2 PCIe SSD slot, you can expand your Mini's storage capacity to gigantic proportions. 3 Thunderbolt USB-C ports enable you to connect millions of Thunderbolt, USB, and future USB 4 drives, displays, AV mixers, cameras, and tablets, as well as desktop accessories like a keyboard, card reader, or mouse. Now, the possibilities of how you can use your Mac Mini are limited only to your imagination. Find the new Mini Stack STX and all your storage needs at macsales.com/rockstars. The STX 100D from the Spectra 1964 Custom Shop is the big brother to the now famous STX 100, a fully discrete mic pre with dual transformer isolated Spectra 101 amplifiers. The STX 100D is exactly the same original circuit found in Stax, Ardent, AdVision, A&M, and Record Plant recording consoles. The sonic performance is identical. Best of all, it will plug into a single space of your standard 500 lunchbox. And if you want to add the sound of the famous Spectra C610 complementer, then check out the new STX 600 modules, combining the STX 100 mic pre and C610 in a single 500 module. Now you can get that same incredible sound in your studio that worked for famous producers like Tom Dowd with the STX mic pre's, BBDI, and complementers. Go to Spectra1964.com or call 801-797-0642. Yeah, that's super cool. Now, were there any challenges to remembering, oh crap, which one was that? Because one of the advantages, this is a loaded question. One of the advantages I think we have right now is we have these phones, iPhones. You can easily, even if you just wanted to see what it sounded like on an iPhone recording, you could just walk around with the video camera on and then watch that video and be like, ooh, right in this spot, the drums, or the instruments sound really cool. Or you could take, a video of somebody moving the mic around and then go back and watch it afterwards.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. I could tell you this was before the iPhone was even out that I did this experiment.
Yeah.
So basically, what I did is I would just say where I was in the room, and just so that way when I was listening, I just made marks like, oh, there, and then I knew. So then at that point,
so glad you mentioned that, because that's a great reminder. We do that sometimes when I have an assistant do what's called the human mic stand. If we're going to listen to 5 mics on an instrument, it's just like, plug it in, say what mic it is, hold it with your hand on the instrument. Let's listen to the next one, and then we'll listen back to the recording. Sorry, go ahead, keep going. No, what you're saying is great. You're prompting me with some wonderful memories of stuff too.
Well, what you just described, I actually experienced as well. I did with the engineer and one of my close friends, Jeff Emmerich. For those who know who that guy is, yeah. Jeff Emmerich was really good friends with Rupert Neve. And Jeff and I, in the same way that Jack Tempchin called me one day, and all of a sudden everything changed in my life, the same thing happened with another artist by the name of Nellie Mackay. Nellie Mackay called me out of the blue one day. She was in town on the road on tour, and she was looking for a spot to go in and just, she would always be proactive while she's out touring. She'd go into studios everywhere and keep working. And she called me and, came to my place and we hit it off and had wonderful sessions. And then the next time she was in town, she called me and she said, I'm going to send my producer over to check out your place. He wants to see it. And it turns out it's this guy named Jeff Emmerich. Wow. I did not know who he was at that time because I did not grow up aspiring to be an engineer or a producer or recording others or even paying attention to other engineers. So that was not on my burner at the time. So I didn't know who he was. And I looked him up before he came over and I was like, oh no, this guy, he's going to think my place is just a joke.
What were the things that you saw about him that you recognized right off the bat?
Well, the first thing is a photo of him at Mark Knopfler's studio. So he's, in front of this giant SSL, you know what I mean? And it's like I'm working basically in the box with preamps, Neves, APIs, and things of this nature off to the side. So there's no giant console in my place. And then once I learned, oh, this is the guy who recorded up, most of the Beatles stuff and all this other thing, I just think he's not, this isn't going to go good. But anyways, let's see how it happens. But you know what? He was that guy who walked through the threshold and went, oh my God, like he felt it right away. So him and we hit it off right away. And like any decent person, he put me at ease right away. And I apologized to him. I said, I'm sorry. I'm sure I don't have any of the equipment you're used to using and all this sort of stuff. And no, he's like, no, what you have is great. It's going to be fine. I like it. He just basically put me at ease because I would say the wonderful thing about Jeff to the core was that if for those rock stars out there who maybe some have had this experience or some haven't, I'm sure you might have. When I went to school, grade school, junior high, all that kind of stuff, we'd have these guys that were called the AV guys, the audio visual guys that would be walking in the hall, out in the hall, and while
you got a cart, you roll the VCR and stuff around the cart, the slide, or what was the projector thing, right?
The projector,
overhead projector.
Exactly. So he was that guy, and so I knew that right away. It's like this guy just loves the essence and just everything about the just the arts and the science of what this is. He's just the real deal about being in the mix. That's all it was. Just being a part of something cool that was in that in the realm of that, the audio world. So we ended up hitting it off really well, became really good friends and co-produced stuff and worked on projects together. He'd refer projects to me. I mean, it was just incredible. The relationship that came out with him. But one day he called me and he was really good friends with Rupert Neve. And so Rupert had asked Jeff if he would do a shootout of a new ribbon mic that he had just made. So Jeff called me and asked me, hey, do you want to do a mic shootout at your place? I'm like, sure. So I called the drummer, Don Heffington. He comes over and sets up in the center of the room. And like you just said, we had 5 different ribbon mics. And then we did blind tests, to see, we recorded Don with these mics, not knowing. And then we all, we had them labeled in a way where we could check after and go, okay, this, and this. But so, and then we all listened and we all chose the ones that we thought, we ranked them all. And then there they were, the ones that ended up, being the best and the worst and all of that. So I've been through that mic shootout that you're talking about. And so that's a great way to learn, to sharpen your ear, for different things, and then you take that, like when a session comes in and you're like, oh, I know this mic's sonically going to do this and this amp is like this. So I'm going to put this mic on that amp. And, that's how you learn how to, decide which mic you want to use, when you're hearing somebody in the room. So the blind shootouts are a great way with your gear is a great way for you to tighten up and just raise your game.
That's cool. That's cool. And it's just a good reminder to us that no matter where we are in our recording experience, the journey, whether we've been doing this whether it's new or we've been doing it forever, there's always some aspect of this that we just don't know. And we need to keep reminding ourselves to have that play time where it's like, go move the mics around, try things in different ways that you haven't done yet, and discover all these, unknown colors in our palette that are just right there waiting for us to start using in the session.
Absolutely. Yeah. You can use things in multiple ways. You're right. And that's a great way to know what can I do with my stuff.
Yeah. You don't always need new stuff. Sometimes you just need a new way to use the stuff you got.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, cool, man. So these are great stories, man. I don't even want to suggest we go in any direction because I'm afraid I'm going to miss some other great story that you haven't shared yet. But we may have to do more interviews with you coming up just to keep covering all this. But meanwhile, I want to ask you a couple of questions. First of all, give us a shout out. You have a fantastic record of your own that's on your website too. Rockstars, I just went and picked it up, so I recommend you do. I think you just called it demos or something like that. But it's great, man. I was listening to you record. I'm like, holy shit, this sounds like Eddie Van Halen, man. This is really cool. Maybe without the fast finger work, but tonally, man, your guitar tones are just killer.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you saying that. That's a lifetime quest. Edward. That's there's several shows that would there's just several hours of what I could say as it relates to this. But basically, what those are is those are demos. That's exactly what they were. Those were from a while ago, and I've actually been working on a new record for quite a while, which is
cool.
its own story. But so I got the studio for myself. As you know, I started out as a guitar player. I was playing long before I ever even heard who Edward Van Halen ever was. But the thing that happened to me, and this is apropos to this record I've been working on, which I kind of call my life's work. And thanks for pointing out that the thing about Ed for me was I never did get into the flash aspect of what it was that he was doing, although I can do that sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I learned very early on that there was a much deeper thing going on. And basically, I had an experience happen to me in 1981 when I was 12 years old, and it happened in that bedroom that all the other musical things that happened to me in my life occurred from, whether it be leaning to a friendship with Dweezil Zappa, to knowing Frank and working on his music, to knowing Ed, becoming friends with him. It all happened from that childhood bedroom. And how it occurred, I do not know. But I can tell you, it all comes from that. Even Jack Tempchin's name,
Yeah.
So,
well, for me, it was getting Diver Down as a 8th grade graduation gift from my friend Jeff Jones. Shout out to you, Half Unit, if you ever hear my podcast one day.
Bless that guy. Well, yeah. So for what happened for me with Ed was I had an experience in that childhood bedroom where I had borrowed the record Fair Warning. Now, I tried to see Van Halen in 1980, but my parents wouldn't let me go. I saw Kiss, the original Kiss lineup in 79 with Judas Priest opening up for him. And now it's 1980 and it's like, why can't I see Van Halen? You let me see Kiss, but I don't remember why. So 1981 comes around, Unchained's on the radio. And I'd never heard anything like that tune. It just spoke to me. And I'm like, there's no way I'm going to miss them this time around. So then that was the first time I saw them, July 7th, 1981 at the St. Paul Civic Center. Totally changed my life. Still to this day, the best show ever. And I've been on the side of the stage. I had front row for 84. I mean, I've been to Van Halen rehearsals. This 1981 was the one for me. Okay. But what happened? I borrow Fair Warning from a friend. I'm listening to the record in my bedroom. The intro to the 4th song comes on called Hear About It Later. I'm standing there and all of a sudden I have an experience where something took my heart out from me. It made it separate from me. And I never had that experience before. And all of a sudden I'm experiencing and watching what is happening to my heart. It was the craziest thing. And I had an epiphany, or I had something came into my head at that time, and it said, you are going to spend your entire life finding out, searching for how to make this happen.
Mm.
You're going to follow this one guy, this one artist alone. There's a lifetime of seeking in just this one artist. And I made that declaration to myself at 12 years old in that bedroom at that moment.
Wow.
And so that's what I started doing. And what I learned right away was soon as MTV came out in the Midwest, which was in 82 around that time, 83, and I saw videos and things that, I went to a concert already. I saw them in 81, 82, 84, 86, just on and on and on. But the videos showed me something that I didn't catch that I caught at the live concert. And what I'm going to say right now is I have to deviate for 1 second.
Sure.
I was working at a music store in Minnesota called the Rock Guitar Center in 1983, 84, 85. This is before the Guitar Center ever came to that area.
Mm-hmm.
There was a store there. And so I was a young kid working there after hours for a little bit of money here and there just to hang around the big guys,
Yeah.
And so there were guitar players that would come in, and one guy in particular that worked there was a phenomenal player. I mean, phenomenal, and could really play some of Ed's stuff. But what I started to realize is that all sorts of people come in and played the notes, but none of it felt right. And I paid close attention, like, why are these guys are so good and they're playing the notes and it's such, it sounds like this and that, but nothing. It's flat. It's not hitting me at all. I started to have a realization in myself when I started seeing videos and things at Ed that I didn't catch at the live shows at that time in 81 and 82. I didn't have the epiphany yet. But in 84, I had front row at his feet and he put a pick in my hand. It was amazing. We had dialogue with the concert. He was talking to me. I was talking to him. Eye contact, constantly coming over to me like he was just playing for me. That's how it seemed, okay? Now, let me go back a little bit because I know I'm jumping around a little bit. So I had something occur to me, and that was, didn't matter what the notes were playing. It didn't matter what his hands were doing. I started paying attention to his feet. His vibe, his essence was talking to me more from his feet than from his fingers and his hands. In other words, his feel was more dominant and more obvious and more clear for me to see by the way he moved his body and the way he connected to the ground.
That's fascinating. Yeah.
Now later, I've had that confirmed later through another guitar player. I actually had this talk with Ed. He knew all this. I talked to him about this. So it was in his feet. Now, if you watch Farm Aid, when he plays the rock and roll, the solo in rock and roll, watch his feet. When you see the So This Is Love video from 81, watch him from the knees down or the waist down. It's all in his feet. That's where his attitude was at. That's where his essence came out for me. That's what I noticed. So now in 1984, here I am at his feet. That's, because the stage
Yeah.
is at that level, right?
Yeah, right.
So everything he's doing is right in front of me. And all I'm looking at, other than when he'd come over, I'd see his face and his hands. I'd look at everything, of course, but his feet were talking to me. So I spent my life, 40 years, chasing Ed by following his feet. And the record that I've created from that, and he knew this story, and he was going to be the very first person to hear this record that I've been working on for almost 40 years, is almost done. And I never worked on it when I had the residue of another client on me. So that's why it's taken me so long. And then it wasn't always my main focal point, like through the 90s, like, oh, I got to make that record from when I declared when I was 12 years. Like that was out of my mind at that point. I was just trying to, move forward and getting this band off the ground and all that. I forgot my main mission. Other than I've always kept, like, if you can think of the 10 Commandments where they part the Red Sea, that's how, ever since I made that declaration, I've tried to keep all music that I think would interfere with the purity of Ed, the way it affected my heart, I keep it at bay.
Yeah.
I've physically kept it at bay.
Well, Eddie was known to say that too. I remember hearing something about an interview with him where people asked him like what music you listen to, and he said, "I don't really listen to anything else. I just listen to my own songs."
Yeah,
the interview or somebody joked about it as if it was like a, like a myopic, just putting a mirror in front of yourself thing, not taking influence. But I think maybe it's related to what you're saying, which is like, I don't want other stuff to, affect what I'm trying to do here. I want to really find my own voice in what I'm doing. Maybe that's more of the direction.
I think so. I think I agree with you. And the way I would relate it on my end is that, what have I been trying to do? Well, I'm creating the best single malt that I can. It's not a blended version. It's a single malt. Right. Just for that analogy. But let me tie this in now to a conversation a few years back. So the guy who has been my amp tech and good friend for 25, 26 plus years, a guy named Doug Anderson. And
I'll just say, having listened to your demos, he must be really good.
He's really good. And he grew up out with the brothers in Pasadena, and he's from that area and he's from that world. And he works on a lot of heavy duty guys, amps and whatnot. And so one day, one of his clients had called him, asking him, trying to search some stuff for some techniques for recording guitars, for guitar tones, for what he's about to work on. And so this guy calls me up, and this guy's name is Rusty Anderson. If nobody knows who Rusty Anderson is, he's one of the guys, he's the dark-haired guitar player who plays with Paul McCartney in his band. Okay. Rusty Anderson used to play in a local band with Van Halen back in the days. They were another band playing the clubs at the same time. So they used to do gigs together all the time. So this guy's calling, we're just talking about, how techniques that I'm using to record and this and that, sharing. And then I realized who he is. So at first I didn't know who he was. Then I realized, oh, this is the guy my amp guy talks about all the time. And I'm like, oh, you're that guy you grew up with. So now all of a sudden the topic changes from how do you record your stuff to you used to play in bands that used to do venues with Van Halen. So I shared with him all of my feet stuff, I think it's in his feet. He agreed with me 100%. He said, I used to think the same thing when I'd watch Ed on the side of the stage in the clubs. He said, I used to watch the way he moved around on the stage. He said he moved around like a boxer. The way his feet moved on the ground was most interesting to him. So now, so that to me was like, yeah, I'm not the only one here. Okay, so somebody who was there in the day can see what I'm saying, and he concurred. Then the last time that I spent time with Edward he was at my studio in 2014.
Oh, cool.
And we hung out for a few hours, and I shared this with him. He tripped out on it hardcore, but he told me I did used to take boxing, and he loved even up until I think close to his end of his days. One of the things he really loved to do that he told me was what he called slap fighting.
Wow.
So that was that was kind of part of him. So, however anybody wants to interpret what I've said, I don't know. It's just that's the truth behind why I think I catch Ed's feel in a particular way, because I wasn't going for any of the usual stuff that everybody went for. I was just going for this other thing. And so, it's nothing but gratitude, and at this point I know when I was younger, I didn't really understand what am I searching for. Now I know it's just to exude the master's essence in one way or another.
The Toy Box Studio, aka Recording Studio Rockstar's headquarters, is proud to announce that it is now an official Phantom Focus mix room designed by Carl Tatz. Yay! The beautiful new control room includes Carl's acoustic lens room treatment with the PFM HD 1000 master reference monitors laser aligned for holographic stereo imaging and depth of field with accuracy from 20 hertz to over 20 kilohertz. I've never mixed on a speaker system this awesome before, and it feels great. I used to feel like I would commit to a mix, cross my fingers, and hope that it would translate to the real world. But now, when I dream up a sound that I want to create in the studio, I just turn the mix knobs, and the Phantom Focus monitors tell me truthfully when I get it right. Amazing. Check out my complete interview with Carl Tatz on episode 50 of the podcast and discover the secret to massively improving your monitor setup at carltatzddesign.com/mixroom-mentor. So first of all, what was the name of the amp tech again?
Doug Anderson, the
Doug
Tone
Anderson.
Zone.
All right.
Yeah.
And
then Rusty Anderson is the guitar player that I think his band was called Stormer, and he used to play the clubs with.
And they both just happen to have the same last name.
Yeah,
that's funny.
Yeah, I never thought of that.
And then tell us a little bit about some of the stuff in your tone on your demo. So you've got the guitar is stereo. There's just great delay, use of delays. And there's also like really, really exceptional flanger, I guess, is what you have on the sound. Maybe if there's any fun takeaways. I know maybe it's a pretty deep topic. maybe you use different stuff, but give us a couple things to just get excited about.
Sure. Okay. So it's basically, in chasing Ed's tone, the way I came across it, and this is interesting too, because now since he's passed and Sunset Sounds released all this stuff, I kind of found my way in a unique way. So basically, what it was on those demos. Now, the reason why those demos were even done was because I was doing a session one day with a friend's band. He came in, and instantly when the drummer started playing, that's the only drummer in my life that I've ever heard sound like Al.
Mm-hmm.
Right away when he played, I was like, dude. And not only that, he knew a lot of the bootleg demo stuff that or unreleased stuff that I did. So I approached him right away and said, hey, we should have a jam. That was like, I was looking for that my whole life.
That's
now,
right.
yes, he's playing in my friend's band and I didn't want to steal him from his band. But so I asked my friend who played bass and him to have a jam night. We'll just get together and have a few beers, and this is back when I used to drink alcohol, and we'll just hang out and we'll have a jam night like people have a card night. And so that's what we did, and I recorded it, and it's like we played like 30 Van Halen tunes, and it was like, whoa, like I was like, I had chills. I was like, wow, there's some moments. It was like, we really got something here. And I said to him, how would you feel about trying to write some, like, what I would think to be like unreleased, like our own version of like what we would think of like an unreleased Van Halen song? So that was the premise behind that. So him and I started writing a few tracks together, co-writing, and then we would just record them. And so we would like, oh, this one kind of has a little bit of a feel of this song from this album, and this part has a little bit of a feel from this, and we'd mix them together and create those songs. So that's what those demos were that I recorded. We could never get a full band happening and make it work. Everybody lived far away. Everybody's caught up in their life. So it didn't go anywhere. So we recorded those demos, and I just thought, let's just put them up on YouTube and see what happens. And then, the guy from the Van Halen news desk, Jeff Hausman, called me one day and he's like, what are you doing? Who are you? These sound like unreleased Van Halen songs. And I'm like, yes, that's exactly what I was trying to do. So to get to your question, my rig is, it's 3 heads. So I'm slaving 2 heads, and I'm using 1 head as a preamp, and I'm using 2 Marshall cabs. Actually, those demos are not Marshall cabs. Those are Carvin cabs. Now I have vintage Marshall cabs. Anyways, so on those demos, you have 3 heads. And what I do is I split where one side is wet with my Echoplex slapback. That's the echo you're hearing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's an EP2, old tube Echoplex. And then I'm using the original MXR Phase 90 and the original MXR flanger. And then I'm splitting them through another delay pedal. It's a Digitech PDS 1002. It's just an old delay pedal that I had that you can do a sample and hold with, so you could like play off of it. So I use it because it has a wet out or a dry out. And then I split the signal. So basically the phase and the flanger go through both cabinets. The big echo, the delay, it's only wet on one cabinet, and the Echoplex is always set for slapback. So when I went to a Van Halen rehearsal that Dweezil took me to in 1989 or 1990, I think, I'm standing I'm right in front of Ed's rig, right in front of him, and for the first time I'm catching the bang. So I'm hearing everything's got this quick slap to it, which I never picked up before. I just never listened to that degree. I never heard it like that. So ever since I left that rehearsal, I've always had a
That's great. That's great.
And I run a slap. So that's what it is. So you're constantly hearing a slap back, which makes the rig sound bigger than it is, makes it sound like multiple guitars, and it's not. And then the big echo, I use that if I want to do a bit, just a bigger delay thing. And that's basically it. The reason I'm slaving heads and using 2 rigs is because I could never get the sound out of one amp. So those amps are set differently. One's brighter, one's darker. So it's a blend of the two sounds. Now, that's back in 2008 that those demos came out. Now, what they're releasing on the Sunset Sound and the other things with what they're finding out about how they recorded the early records, same sort of thing, except not two cabs, two different speakers, one dark, one bright. So it's kind of the same thing. I was using 2 amps to do it. He's using two different speakers to do it.
Hmm.
So it's a blending of the two sounds, that make the sound.
Well, that's super cool, man. Thanks so much for breaking that down.
Yeah.
It's great. Again, Rockstars, I highly recommend you go check it out. Go buy and pick up Craig's demo on the website, which is which one was that on? Was that on the personal one or on Winslow Court?
That's on the personal one, CraigParkerAdams.com. And then the other, then Winslow Court Audio is the business one. But you can get to either or from either or.
Okay, cool. Well, let me, before we run out of time totally, bring us up to speed on your friendship with dweezil and your involvement in Frank Zappa's discography, his catalog, because it looks like you've done a ton of stuff over there.
Oh, it's been incredible. I think if you were to add up like how many CD, like if you were to jam a CD full of 80 minutes of audio, at this point over the last 10 years, I've probably done, I think, 90 CDs, in between 80 and 90 CDs jam-packed full of audio for the Trust. Not even talking about, that includes dweezil's Zappa Plays Zappa too.
And I don't know if I've told you that I'm a big Zappa fan. I always have been.
Well, that's a beautiful thing. I think you did mention it when you reached out, and I think you said all you had to say was Zappa or something like that. So I love it. Yeah, Frank. I saw Frank in '84. My brother turned me on to him back in the '70s. And something to mention is when I was 13 years old, or 12 or 13 years old, 1982. After school one day, I remember this clear as the day. I was just sitting on the edge of my bed, sunlight coming through the window, just playing guitar on the edge of the bed, and all of a sudden, right in front of my face, just like, my brother shoves a newspaper cutout right in front of my face. And it's a picture of a 12-year-old kid named Dweezil Zappa with a guitar that Eddie Van Halen just gave to him. And my brother goes, "Here's your competition." And I was just like, who is this? And he just looked so cool, and just the guitar and the whole deal. And so that's how I got turned on to Dweezil, right? Who he was and all of that. Well, now jump ahead to 1988, and I've been following Dweezil for years, and his dad and whatever, and I moved to California, and I moved to California with 5 days notice with a friend who goes, "Hey, I'm going to boot camp. I can drive you." He's going to San Diego boot camp, and so it's like I had another friend who said you could stay on my couch. So with $88 and 3 guitars, I left home. That was it.
Wow.
And and a year to the day that I moved to LA, I met Dweezil. So I arrived on Labor Day, September 1st, 1988. In June of 1989, I got a job at the Guitar Center on Sunset Boulevard, which was not an easy thing to do back in that time.
Mm-hmm.
But I did. They hired me. And so one day, after working there for a couple months, some guy who was Dweezil's regular guy, he was a coworker that I knew, and apparently he liked me. He came up to me and he goes, "Hey, I got to go do this thing, and I have a customer coming in, and I want you to take care of him. His name is Dweezil Zappa. Do you know who he is?" And I was like, "Yeah, I know who he is." So it was beautiful, man. I mean, there he was, and I just, I'm helping him with the things that he wants, and in between, I'm interjecting all of this stuff, and he's like, "God, you know a lot about me and my dad, and then I told him, I go, "Hey, man, I just recently moved to town, and I don't have a lot of friends here, and I'd really like to be your friend." And he said, "Sure, I'll be your friend." And he gave me his number. And a week later, I'm up at the house in the kitchen with Frank and pretty much the rest of his family. Like, it happened that fast, and we just hit it off, and he just opened up his entire world to me, basically, So now all of a sudden, I'm going to Van Halen rehearsals and stuff. You know what I mean? It was incredible.
Rockstars, this is how we used to add friends before social media.
Yeah, I just asked him, looked him straight in his eye, and I'll never forget. I can see it and summons it at any moment. It's right there. I can see it. Just like that movement, or that same thing when I was outside myself, holding my heart, basically going, "What's going on here?" Like, I can see it as if the moment was there, and I'm so grateful for that. And that's 30 plus years ago that guy has looked out for me in one way or another, or provided some opportunity, or just incredible. It's just incredible. So basically, dweezil and I just became guitar buddies.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like, I remember I'd go on certain vacations, like we went on trips. In fact, when Van Halen opened Cabo Wabo opening night, Ed flew, like, dweezil and I flew down in a prop jet that, I don't know if it was MTV, or if, I seem to remember Ed having something to do with this, but he flew us down there, or they flew us down there in a prop jet for that whole weekend. And so I filmed that whole opening night show from the catwalk on the side of the stage. And so anyways,
Wow.
Dweezil just gave me everything. And so we became really tight friends over the years. And then in the mid 90s, I'm trying to do my band stuff, and he's doing his thing. And at this time, I'm working for the Carvin Corporation as a guitar tech. And I wouldn't say we drift apart, but we're just doing our own thing, and checking in with each other from time to time, like playing things over the phone. What are you working on? This kind of stuff.
Right.
But it wasn't until later, until 2010, where he was he had a contract to fulfill, where they had a bunch of Zappa Play Zappa shows that were being released to fans who bought certain packages. And something happened with his engineer that something couldn't get done. And he was also going through some heavy things in his life at the time. And so I offered up, hey, if you need some help, I'm here for you. So a couple weeks later, he called and he goes, you know what? I think I need to take you up on your offer. Could you help me? And I said, of course. So I went up to the house and basically I have to learn now Nuendo on a PC, or I'm a Pro Tools Mac guy.
Yeah.
And then he's got the console, the Rupert console up there. And so basically I'm there now. I'm picking up the slack and, trying to help him get done what needs to get done. And one day his mom walked in and she's like, "Oh, Craig, what are you doing here?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm here helping dweezil do all this." And she's like, "Oh, I didn't know you did that." And I'm like, "Yeah, she didn't know I had a studio for all those years." And so now she knows that. So about a week or two after that, she just walks in one day and she said, "Hey, how would you feel about mixing something of Frank's?"
Wow,
I never
cool,
even
man.
considered such a thing ever. So that's how that happened. She asked me to mix a song, and I did. And she really, really liked the results of the mix that I did. And I thought it was a one-off, and it wasn't. It just it turned into more and more and more. And so basically, yeah, at this point, it's like I said, like some 80, 90 audio disc worth of things I've done for them over the years. And then, of course, working with dweezil's awesome record from 2014 or 15 we did, called Via Zamata, which I brought Jeff in on that record, introduced him to dweezil. And so Jeff's on that record producing some strings and things like that, Jeff Emmerich. And then another friend of mine, Sean Albro, came in and sang this super heavy track called Dragon Master that dweezil co-wrote with Frank. And then another group called the Songbirds, these great female singers. This is showing all these different styles coming together.
Yeah.
That's the coolness about having clients from all different walks of music, because there is a common ground somewhere. And you may get some hard rocker who wants some angelic voice on something, and you work with these. So you can connect people. And so I would always try to connect clients with other clients if I could help out the client.
That's one of the really fun things about doing a studio. And it's also a little bit of a challenge. I really tried to find systems for this, for keeping track of the different musicians that might come through the studio, making sure you remember to get their contact. Rockstars, somebody else brings a band in, try and remember to get the contact info for every player on that session, and then take a note of what session that was. Because later on, you might have an opportunity, like you're saying, Craig, to just say like, "Oh, you need a great pedal steel player. That's right. Who was that played on that session? I got his contact right here." And it's really fun, like you said, to be able to connect people like that.
Absolutely. I'm just going to take what you said just a little step further and
Sure, please.
say this, that what Liz just said is correct. When you have an artist in, you got one person. When you have a band in, you have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. You have multiple people. So even though you might have one client paying you, every person in your facility is a potential referral or possible new client. Now, I would say, just to preface on top of what Liz just said, is that if I had a client in and they brought in a band or whatever, I would go to the client first and say, do you mind if I ask for the contact info of the people you brought in? I would not sidestep
Mm-hmm.
the client. The only reason I point this out is because I've done that before, and it's sometimes it rubs a certain sort of person the wrong way. So the way you can get around all of that is just to speak to the person and go, man, you brought some really great people in here. They're really cool. I'd love to add them to my Rolodex. Do you have any problem if I ask for anybody's contact information? That lets your client know that you respect them. You're not trying to get whatever they bring in and turn it into some boon for you only. Like
Mm-hmm.
you're giving them a nod, basically. So I just want to point out that protocol. You may not like to, some of you may not agree or not, but I just have to share, because from my experience, I found that to be a useful tool. And the only reason I say this is because when I've asked clients this in before, I can remember multiple times where the client thanked me for asking them first. So
That's
that's
great,
why I
man.
want to point it out. Okay.
That's a great tip. Thank you. Where does that leave us?
with a whole lot of other stuff to talk about some other time on down the line, I guess.
Now, I will say that just recently, we had Frank Filippetti on the podcast, and he was talking about mixing 200 motels, which was done at Disney Theater there, or anyway, I'm going to get the details wrong. But anyway, it's just, I love seeing these kind of connections where, especially through the podcast and all of you who are working on different projects and connecting people. So it's a lot of fun. Dude, if you have anything else that we didn't cover, please bring it up. Otherwise, I'll kind of jump forward to some of our closing questions. And I just want to say it's been really fun to have you on the show.
Well, thank you so much. I think the one thing I'll share with the rock stars that meant something to me is that I had to learn is never feel bad about what you don't know yet.
Yeah.
Never feel bad about what you don't know yet. Don't be embarrassed about what you don't know yet. You're going to find all sorts of different types of clients with different energy, vibes, levels, whatever. Some that'll try and, oh, you don't have this, you don't like, if you know your gear, get to the best with what you got, like really know your stuff, but don't worry about what you don't know yet. And just if you can keep a quest of, some sort of zeal or stoke for the gig, that's awesome. But I just wanted to put that out there, that it's okay that you haven't had certain experiences yet. Just be ready for them. And a really important quote that was so helpful to me when I first started, when I transitioned from guitar player into like, am I going to have a studio? Am I going to do this? I had an engineer friend, a coworker by the name of Rich Ayers, and he's an engineer and was a producer, writer. He does all sorts of stuff, but he was my very early studio mentor. And he said something to me that was so profound, and basically it works in pretty much every level of your existence. And that is preparation meets opportunity.
Right.
Preparation meets opportunity. Be prepared, okay? But then if there's something that comes up that you don't know, no worries. No worries. Learn it then. It's okay. So never feel bad for what you don't know yet.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, because otherwise we'd feel bad all the time, because there's always something we don't know.
Exactly. I think that goes to that other space you were talking about recording or catching the other space. It's just a way to think about something in a different way. You can just flip the viewpoint on something, and all of a sudden you can feel totally different. So some people carry that as a weight. Don't take those things as weights. Just, enjoy them as they come up, and when you get them fresh, just revel in them.
Right on, man. This episode is sponsored by Recording Studio Rockstars Academy. Are you ready to take your recording, mixing, and mastering to the next level and make your best record ever? Then visit the Academy to find the course that's right for you. Want to record killer drums in your studio? Then check out Rockstars of Drums to learn how to record, edit, and mix pro-sounding drums with a professional Nashville session drummer in a Grammy-winning studio. Or if you're ready to start mastering your own records at home, then check out Rockstars of Mastering, where I walk you through exactly how I mastered my own record, Skadoosh, the soundtrack to this podcast, in fact, using nothing but plugins in PreSonus Studio One. These techniques would work for you no matter what DAW you're using right now. And if mixing is your focus, then check out my free course, Mix Master Bundle, where I show you how to mix using stock and free plugins in Pro Tools. Plus, you get a look at how I recorded everything in my studio and multi-track downloads to practice your mixing and even include in your mix portfolio if you want. Are you ready to make your best record ever? Then go to mixmasterbundle.com to get started now, or look for the clickable link in the show notes of this episode. Well, now how about sharing a recording tip, hack, or secret sauce, something the rock stars could use on their next session today? You've already gotten into some of those, but maybe there's some more that you haven't covered or something you want to drop right now.
All right. Well, let's see. A recording tip.
Anything for vocals. So you know what? I didn't really comment on this, but when you were talking about Eddie's feet, it reminded me of the critical importance of recognizing full body movement in all the things that we record. Like I can't tell you how many times, like whether I'm counting off the band to start a take, how like the physical body movement of that count determines the right tempo, or whether it's like somebody's going to sit down at the Hammond organ and play. It's like the more you act like a mad scientist when you do that Hammond organ overdub, the better it's going to sound, because it's that kind of instrument, you know.
Yep.
Or singers that get in front of a mic and they start singing and they put their hands like clasped, like they're standing in, you know, as part of the wedding party or at a funeral or something. And I'm like, dude, what are you doing? You know, like,
right. Oh, you know, yeah, it's because
I
have a guy, actually with Jack singing into a beautiful, you know, like a Neumann mic, but he likes to hold the stand. So I would put a mic stand under the Neumann, and he would be holding the round bass stand, moving it around like he's not live on stage, but he's singing into a nice mic. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's great.
So that was something. But, you know, I would say, and I think maybe some of your rock stars would likely already know this, but, you know, the thing called the Haas effect is a hack that I use a lot.
Oh, yeah.
That's a technique that I love, to be able to get things to come out of a mix, basically, without either, you know, like the novice might duplicate the track or, you know, to just turn it up even more. But there's something unique that happens from the Haas effect, which is basically running a delay on the source and keeping it, you know, between, I think it's 11 and like 40 milliseconds. And if you introduce that into the stereo field, to make something stick out, wherever you put it in the stereo field, your brain will not differentiate it from the actual source. So wherever it will bring up the inherent volume, but the listener's not being pulled to, oh, there's this and a slapback over there. They're not hearing it being split apart. So for me, that's something a technique that I learned from Bob Katz in his book, Mastering the Art and the Art and Science of Audio. And I've used that for so many years. So that's a trick that that I use in the box, so to speak, in a mixing situation. And then, you know, outside of that, I think in terms of the metaphysical aspects of a session, it would be what you and I had talked about sharpening your instincts and then really, using and trusting them. But you need to monitor your client's response to your instincts for you to sharpen them. In other words, I feel it should go here. Well, now you have to ask the person who's paying you what they think, or the person who's, playing on it. And if they concur, watch at the level that they concur at, because that is directly related to your instincts. So, you know what I mean? Use that as a measurement. So that's my metaphysical hack. And then the other one is the Haas effect in the box.
So the Haas effect is really great. And I think the first time I learned a little bit about that was watching Tom Lord Alge mix, and he would take a mono guitar or some sound that we had and add a short delay and pan that to the other side. And I noticed it's like, wow, you get this instant widening effect by
Exactly.
doing stuff like that without it
Yeah.
keeping mono.
Yep. And you can hear too, and then use your ears to test between like 11 and 40 milliseconds how tight that is,
Mm-hmm.
because then all of a sudden you'll start to hear the separation once you get beyond that. And then, like I said, then you'll just totally notice, like, oh, I get it. Okay. It's like two separate things. I see.
Now another aspect of the Haas effect that I think is worth mentioning too is that reminder that if we have the same sound coming out of the left and right speakers perfectly in phase, that equals mono. That means that equals something that sounds to us panned up the middle.
Yep.
But if you take one of those, just the right speaker, and you just start delaying it ever so slightly, like 1 millisecond, 2 milliseconds, 3 to 4, 5, then you get the Haas effect there where it sounds less like it's a widening effect, and it actually sounds like a psychological psychoacoustic panning.
That's cool.
Like the sound starts shifting over to the left because your left ear hears it slightly before your right ear, and you get the impression that it's panned to the left, even though it's not.
I'm so glad you said that. That is the technique that I'm currently using, mixing the record that I've been working on for all these years. So, yep.
That's cool.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
So rock stars, try on a record. Just say, I'm not going to pan anything. I'm actually going to just try the Haas effect on everything. But then you do need to then try the mono button and discover what effect that has on the sound when you sum it back to mono. It can sound phasey and stuff. So, but it's just really cool. I love discovering things like that. I remember the first time when I was at school and they taught us stereo miking techniques, and I was like, whoa, mind blown, And I went up to St. Louis to my buddy Megan. Shout out to you, Megan, if you're listening to this episode. But we spent all weekend with 250 SM57s, and we went down into his basement below his studio, and we just stereo mic'd everything we could find. Like literally, we're stereo miking shelves and cabinets made out of old metal and just banging on them and stuff just to hear what the effect would do. And that stuff's really fun,
Yeah.
Well, cool, man. How about a favorite hardware tool in the studio? Anything physical you love having around?
Yeah, I really have to go back to my very first preamp that I bought, and it goes back to that guy Rich Ayers, because we were working together. He had cut records before in multi-million-dollar studios, and this is right when the Avalon 737 SP came out. The very first time, the early years. So. That is definitely my favorite piece of hardware, and I've had it for 25 years, as well as I have a huge collection of preamps and all varying like 5-6 different types of flavors that and it really cool. But there's something about that Avalon that just wins out every time for me when I'm trying to just get anything that's acoustic or vocally driven. That is my favorite piece. So I would say that.
That one has a direct input too, so you can cut bass straight through it and things like that if you want.
Absolutely. Right? Yeah, you can definitely use it for that as well. However, I don't use it so much for that, but you can, and I have. But definitely for like vocals, violins, cellos, acoustic guitars, percussion, stuff like that. It just has a way of really not coloring, even though it has the capacity to color because it has great EQ and compressor. But it just, when I hear it in the room and then I turn that on, it's like, yeah, that's what I just heard. Okay, go. So That's what I love about it. It's a no-brainer for me.
Cool.
And it's also the first one I got. So I have an affinity towards it. And the only reason I bought it is because my mentor would just show me pictures and go, look how sexy this thing is. Never even heard it. Just because he kept talking about it and how sexy it looked, I was like, I'm going to buy that thing one day. And I did.
Right on. How about a software tool that you really dig in, whether it's a favorite or just something you're excited about right now?
Well, for software, I'm not super exciting about that for others, I'm sure, because my favorite plugin that I use would basically be just the default Pro Tools 7-band EQ. And
nice.
It's just that simple. And why? Well, because there's something about the plugins that they make as opposed to the ones that you can use with them. And so this EQ, although it's not super versatile, you can't really get super tight cues on it. sonically, when it's on or off, it's not altering what I'm hearing unless I'm implementing the effect at that point. In other words, when I activate the plugin, I don't hear a difference. Once I start maneuvering it, it's cool. And so for that EQ aspect, that really is the most, that's the plugin I use the most. It's just their standard, EQ.
Right.
Outside of that, for like effects and for like a really versatile, unique plugin for effects that I love using is just the basic Echo Farm, the Line 6 Echo
Yep.
Farm. For me, I just love it. It can get a grit that's so unique and interesting that I've used it on so many things, and then it's also really cool for like what I would call like that kind of like 90s Euro pop kind of Radioheady, or you can use it in a way that works for that sort of stuff as well. But it's I mean, it's kind of an endless tool. I just point out a couple of things, the grit and that other the band I just mentioned. But I love using that tool. It's just easy to do things with. So I would mention that one.
Yeah, I like that one a
Yep.
lot. One of the things I like about Echo Farm is that when I throw it on, like if I'm doing a vocal or something, I'm like, oh, it'd be cool to have something. I throw that on. It tends to give me something that works in the mix because it's almost like it doesn't give me a full spectrum EQ. It gives me something that's got a little bit mid range and the grit, so that I can hear it. It speaks,
Yeah, it stands out in some unique way, or
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
it works well with others. So yeah.
Well, awesome, dude. Well, so we're at the end of our time, but let me ask you our closing question that I love to ask on the show. This one is hypothetical, and you get to take the Wayback Studio machine. Which, damn, we're gonna have to go pretty far back for your studio, like all the way back. And I guess we wouldn't find you there in 1900. But if we go way back and find you, maybe you're 12 and playing guitar, and thinking about, having that moment where you're holding your heart. And you go back and you give yourself advice and you say, listen, dude, I'm here from the future, but I want to give you this important bit of advice. Here's the single most important thing you need to know to be a rock star of the studio yourself one day. What advice would you go back and give yourself if you could?
Well, outside of the obvious of being stoked or passionate about what you're doing, like you have to be authentic, right? So you definitely have to have authenticity. But really, I would actually learn, I'm just going to assume that the rock stars are authentic in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
So it's something you're just driven and passionate to do. Whatever that may be, I'm behind the verse, and that is, if they're not hurting others, man, get into it. Whatever it is, live it up. But what I would say business wise is points, back end points. I'd go there. I would say negotiate with your people in a way, if you can, whether you take less on the front end, if you can. But if you can get in at that level with the engineers, you'll like what I've learned from the engineers that came before me is that if you talk to Tom Dowd, if he was around today, he would have said that. Like
Mm-hmm.
he was completely passionate about everything he ever did. It was awesome, and the work is the merit. So character is destiny in that sense. So you're going to get enriched if you do that passionately. When you leave the body, you're enriched. So you did great. But if you want to navigate this world and be as comfortable as possible, find a way that you can diplomatically handle the people you work with, where you too can get a piece on the back end.
Mm-hmm.
And after the Music Modernization Act that got signed into law 2 years ago, that is for people like us. We're supposed to get a piece of the work if we can. But do we want to labor down the artist who's barely can afford what's going on? Or some can, some can't. So you have to understand that not all artists are going to want to be like, but I mean, intrinsically they should understand the importance of that, because they would like to get compensated for their what they're contributing as well. But I would say to try and find a way where that's not a weird topic, an uncomfortable topic. Try and make it part of the norm, and you can do it in a way where they can where you can help them. Like, look, I can save you a little bit now if I get a little piece more of the back end because I know you're up against this, that, or the other.
Mhm.
You could carry that attitude, or you could be one of those other ones that's like, I don't want to do it unless I'm getting. Not only am I getting my rate, but I'm getting points because
Mhm.
all the big time guys, they all get points.
Yeah. Yeah.
They do. And those are the guys that they're the ones that are really doing great in that sense. Um, so I think that's really what I would say, because I'm just going to assume that you're in it for the right reasons and you want to accommodate others as well. So that part is done and dusted. Now let's move on to protecting yourself in the smartest way possible. So that's what I would say.
Well, that's great. And traditionally, um, the that may look like, oh, find a lawyer, get some kind of simple contract, make agreements, do written agreements with people. And then more recently, that could be something as simple as when you sign up to DistroKid to release this album, just everybody who's participating in this creates an account there too, because it will allow you to predetermine what the splits are for the income on that, if that's going to be where the income source is. And then in the future, it might be these things like people discussing NFTs and ways to take advantage of, the online world of the internet and blockchain accountability and
Yeah.
distributed, public decentralized ledgers that will simply let people create something that for the entire life of that thing, even when it exchanges hands and it's no longer owned by the people who started it in the first place, you still participate in the royalties and the benefits and the income.
Yeah, and I would say everything that Lidge just said, but don't if it's okay to claim your ground. Just but be just keep that same attitude. You're not trying to make enemies. You're not trying to hurt anybody, and you're not trying to take advantage of anybody. So just be open to the negotiation aspect of it. Speak openly and squarely with your clients about it, and you will find a nice, smooth way that works good for you, rock star, and find your way that will maybe rub off on others, but it can be done in a very respectful,
Yeah.
tactful way that doesn't seem like greed or any of that sort of stuff. And that's where your flexibility and your attitude will shine the most. And it's true, you could scare people away, but not always. So you might have to tiptoe at first and test the waters and what you feel comfortable with. But again, truthfully, that's what I would say. I would really say that because the guys that I know were guys that, they were in that situation. These are guys that sold millions and millions and millions and millions of records, but they were paid for a work for hire at the moment on what it was, and that was it. Now, that was the deal then, but not for everybody. It just depends if you have the wherewithal to negotiate. So
Yeah.
don't be afraid to negotiate, or at least open it up, and you'll feel your way through.
So you're reminding me of a takeaway too. And this is kind of funny, but this comes from a mug that my girlfriend just gave me. It's an MBA focused mug, and it's got these quotes on it while you're drinking your coffee. And one of them says that if there's no problem, one of them says if there's no solution, then there's no problem. And I was thinking about that and I was like, what does that mean? And I just realized that applies to this, which is at the beginning, if you don't know what that negotiation is and you struggle to figure it out, or you're trying too hard, then the reason why you didn't find a solution is because there wasn't a problem yet, right? But later, as you're doing this and as you begin to identify, well, here's a way to solve that. Here's what could happen. Here's a potential negotiation point. You feel more and more comfortable at negotiating and figuring out what you're talking about, Craig. And the reason that there's a solution is because now you've identified the problem, so you can actually solve it and look forward like that. So pretty cool, man.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Wow.
All right, cool, man. Well, so what an absolute pleasure having you here on the show. I wish we could just keep going, but I do have to get ready for the next interview, which is happening right around the corner. So please let the rock stars know how they can find you. Where would you like them to go check out your amazing work, this incredible studio, and go pick up your recordings?
Wow. Okay. Well, so Winslow, WINSLOW CT, sampleaudio.com is the website for all things that we've been talking about. And then craigparkeradams.com is where that's more just like the record, the demos, a little bit, some other stuff, and then it links over to the other site. So those are the two main websites that you can find me at, and reach me out or anything at all. That's where I'm at.
Dude, totally awesome, man. Thank you so much for hanging with us. Can't wait to meet you in person. And, next time I'm out in LA, hopefully we connect.
Well, I'll say likewise, my honor to be able to even speak to the rock stars, yourself included. And hey, just keep rocking, right?
Right on, dude. And when you're in Nashville, give me a shout.
I will do so. Thank you for your time.
All right, man. Cheers. We'll talk to you soon.
Take care, everybody.
Thanks so much for listening to Recording Studio Rockstars. If you enjoyed the show and want to help make it better, then please share this episode with your friends on social media and leave a rating and review on iTunes to help the podcast reach more rock stars like yourself. You can click directly over to iTunes or go to rsrockstars.com/review for an easy explanation. And remember to hit the subscribe button to keep up with weekly episodes. And if you're ready to make your best record ever now, then head over to Recording Studio Rockstars Academy, where you can start with my free course at mixmasterbundle.com. And if you want more free content from Recording Studio Rockstars, all you have to do is go to rsrockstars.com/email. Again, that's rsrockstars.com/email to enter your name and email, and I'll keep you in the loop with articles, videos, podcast updates, and even free gear giveaways for your studio. Just look for the link in the show notes below. Thanks so much for listening, and thanks for being a rock star. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is Recording Studio Rockstars. Now, go make great music. Recording Studio Rockstars would like to give a big thank you to our amazing sponsors who help make this episode possible. OWC, Spectra 1964, Samply, Carl Tatz Design, and Isotope. Remember to use the coupon codes ROCK10 at isotope.com/rockstars for 10% off any individual plugin purchase. Or start your extended 30-day free trial subscription to get access to lots of plugins. And sign up for your free account at samplyaudio.com and get 2 projects now. Or use the coupon code RSR20 to get 20% off the first 3 months of subscription. Plus, use the coupon ROCKSTAR for 10% off any course at Recording Studio Rockstars Academy for a limited time. You'll find links to all these wonderful sponsors in our show notes. Just scroll down. These are all things I highly recommend for your studio. They're going to help you make your best record ever. I would also like to thank our fantastic team here at Recording Studio Rockstars, Vlad Weselchenko, Braden Stremming, and John Richardson for additional podcast and video production. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode. Cheers.